Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Movie Mates podcast. I am Matthew, once again, joined by my wonderful co-host and best friend.
Oh,
Hey man, great to see you. So on today's show, we're delving back into the franchise that we started off with, of course, the MCU, with the most latest release, Black Widow, a film that has been delayed and changed about in terms of release dates, and we're glad to be finally reviewing it because it feels like this movie has been marketed for like years to me. And to be fair, it has. I think the first trailer dropped either 2019 or 2020. It was quite some time ago that now. So yeah, I'm going to pass over to Callum to explain the premise of this film, when is it set, and whatever, and those kind of things. So yeah, off to you, mate.
so the film is set in between Civil War and Infinity War. It takes place in the moment in which I was going to say Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow, is on the run from the government, and she has to return to her homeland to address her past and take down the evil that brought the Black Widow into the world. And if you wanted to approach it with non-spoilers and then spoilers,
Yeah.
my spoiler thoughts are quite extensive. My non-spoilers not so much. Would that be all right?
Absolutely, mate. Yeah, I think there is quite a, it's not the biggest MCU film in terms of repercussions for the universe or anything like that, or any Easter eggs. But there's just still a decent amount to talk about in here for spoilers, and so I think that's a good way to go about it. But yeah, just before we kick off today's episode, as you're probably aware by the last couple of videos, our 100th podcast is coming up. This being our 97th, so we're going to be doing like a Q&A sort of. A bit more of a candid episode, like our 50th special. So be sure to leave any comments down in this video or any of the recent videos, and we'll always be there to react to them and definitely answer your questions in that big Centurion podcast. And of course, our email and our iTunes link and time codes, all that jazz is in the description as always. So yeah, I mean, I'll pass over to you for non-spoiler remarks to start us off.
Well, just to get a vague reaction for the film, I know you saw this film with your work friends. I saw this with my dad. Both reactions that I got from you and my dad were on the meh side. Of course, we'll go into further detail with massive hitter piece of shit later on, but you seemed a bit underwhelmed with this film.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really describe it. I think you probably will agree with this. It doesn't really feel like an MCU film to me anyway. And with it being like a prequel and it being, more of an individual story, of course it's going to feel that way. But I just feel like there's very little connectivity here in regards to other films. And with that, I just was expecting a lot more. And it's not that Scarlett Johansson is bad. She's fantastic at this character. Like she is the definitive Black Widow. And I actually don't think I think she gives a terrific performance, but I actually think Florence Pugh's character is the standout by far.
Bit of a shame, right?
Yeah,
You wait 11 years. Her first appearance was in Iron Man 2 back in
yeah,
2010.
I know.
11 years for your film to come out, and then the wide consensus is that your sister character has
Yeah.
outshined you.
And I think with that, I mean, I just think they waited too long for this film. I just don't think the timing of it's right at all. And I think it will obviously be hindered box office wise too, because I think the hype has definitely died down. It certainly had for me anyway. I can't really think of a time where I've been least hyped for an MCU film in a while. Probably since Ant-Man and the Wasp or something like that. I just want to get this out of the way. It's nothing to do with because it's like a standalone movie character. It's Marvel's first female sort of lead film. That's definitely not
Aside from
in the
Captain
picture.
Marvel.
I'm sorry, aside from Captain Marvel, and this of course Black Widow being one of the main sort of characters in the MCU. I really wanted her to have a really great film, and there's still a lot to be enjoyed here. It's just for me, I think plot wise, it feels very kind of lackluster, villains lackluster, and I don't know, mate. It just wasn't for me, and a lot of the points I just sort of evidence that or to explain that rather will probably be in spoilers. What's your overall reaction? Because I think you probably enjoyed this a lot more than your dad and myself did.
Well, I think you bringing up the issue of timing is very relevant. If you're gonna set a film between Civil War and Infinity War, maybe make it in the time that it's meant to be set in. This film could have come out 4 or 5 years ago, and it would have felt more like an organic evolution of the character that we saw then. And I do agree with you. It may just be too late. We've seen Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame. Even the sort of quaint franchise of Ant-Man is now moving into further developing the quantum realm, and now probably with the introduction of Kang moving into moving it into time travel. So now every film, big or small, is becoming an event film. The third Spider-Man film, possibly a Spider-Verse film. Shang-Chi is the introduction of the Mandarin. A big payoff for a character that we've heard rumblings about for 8 years.
Yeah, mate.
So every film is meant to be this big payoff, this big event, and I understand how, based on what we got here, that would be a letdown for some. But for some reason, I was able to remove myself from that, enjoy it for what it was, and honestly, I had a very positive reaction. Throughout the whole film, you saw this film 3 days or so before me. So when I heard your opinion, and what I heard was sort of the wide consensus of meh, I was sort of waiting with bated breath on the point at which it would suck. I was sort of checking in with myself, every 20, 30 minutes going, is it still good? It's still good. And even by the end, I was like, is it still good? It's still good. So I left with a positive opinion.
And that's a great thing about film. Like, you can have your own opinion about things, and that's I want you to enjoy it. You know what I mean? And I'm really glad you did. I think for me, I think we both sort of mentioned this in a podcast about Endgame, or potentially an MCU podcast that we did. I think that the universe is going to have a real problem with smaller contained stories. Like you said, every film is going to have to be some kind of event, be it a Spider-Verse, a multiversal event, Doctor Strange style, time travel, space, sorcery, any of that jazz. I think the universe is going to have a real problem with the more Winter Soldier style, Black Widow style espionage. I just don't think, when you have such a massive cinematic event in Avengers Endgame and Infinity War, it's hard to recapture the imagination of the audience. It's hard to recapture the stakes. It's hard to recapture just the overall spectacle of something like that. And when you come from that, I even noticed it with Spider-Man Far From Home. Like, when you come from Endgame, which is the biggest film of all time, or one of the biggest films of all time, and then you go to Spider-Man Far From Home. Spider-Man Far From Home on its own should be like a spectacle in its own right. It's incredible. It just, for me, it automatically felt lackluster compared to those previous Avengers films, and I think the MCU is going to have a problem with that, just in terms of BHL did a video on this a year or two ago. I think the MCU has peaked with that film, and I really do think it has. I think it's going to have a real issue with that in the future, and it saddens me to say that. Not that the other films can't be good, don't get me wrong, because I think Loki is terrific, and I'm really excited for Doctor Strange and Spider-Man. It's just with this film, I just felt I just didn't get a particular original energy from it at all, really. But unfortunately, I really think this should have come out after Civil War, before Infinity War. And I really, really wanted to like this because the marketing was exceptional. Like, the trailers were class. I just felt disappointed, especially with the villains, and it felt like I don't want to be too critical of it, because it does have a lot to say. It's a great, it's got a lot of great scenes. It just felt very like Marvel Netflix style. Like, a lot of the plots in the Marvel Netflix shows arguably probably felt bigger than the one in this. You know what I mean? It's I don't know, mate. I didn't click with it the way maybe you did.
Yeah, I'm in a lucky position, at least within the context of this film, that I prefer the smaller films. I'd
Yeah.
say Ant-Man, top 5 MCU films easily. And then Avengers Endgame. I've turned around to it slightly. I've watched it 3 or 4 times. My most recent viewing of it was a couple of days ago, when I was when I was re-watching, a few of the ones that I found lackluster before, or ones that maybe had a lower critical perception. I was rewatching all the Thor films. I watched Avengers and Avengers 3 and 4. I skipped Age of Ultron, which I now kind of regret, because it does sort of build out the Black Widow story significantly. But I do have a higher opinion of Endgame at this point, as opposed to our initial review of it. But still, I do prefer films like this, Ant-Man, Iron Man. Ones that even take you back to the beginning of the universe. I mean, even Captain America, the first Avenger, was in comparison to the event films that are there now. It was just a small war film. It's very far removed from the kind of films we see today from the MCU.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think you're right. And I just feel with this film for me, although there is great individual scenes, I don't think there's any that will stick out in my head in like 5 years' time, like there is with Captain America: The First Avenger or Ant-Man or things like that. You know what I mean? When I think of this film, there's nothing memorable about it particularly. I think the action is if you could implement it into any action film, with costumed heroes, and it would make sense. In that regard. And I don't want to be too harsh on it because I think the performances are terrific. I think the dynamics between the characters work really well. Like you said, like we've kind of saying, Florence Pugh, I'm actually really excited about her character in the future of the MCU because I think that could be a real. I think she could arguably be as popular as Scarlett Johansson with the character. I think she's that good. Um, and it actually blew my mind that she's like the partner of JD from Scrubs or something like that. Is Yeah,
Yeah.
I was doing some research on that. Anyway, yeah, and strangely for an MCU film, I think it lacks humor. And not to give too much away, a lot of that humor is predicated down to one actor to deliver those lines. Obviously, David Harbour, who not necessarily known for his comedy, but he can do it. I just feel like just by having all those lines just on David Harbour's character to deliver them, it's a risky business because if they fall flat, then there's no other real character to make the jokes. I mean, Florence Pugh does occasionally, but David Harbour is kind of the comedian of the film, so to speak, and I just think all of his jokes fall flat completely. I just don't think this is his best role. I think he's been better in other things. I think he was actually better in Hellboy. I really didn't like that film. Um,
You didn't like that film?
no, I didn't really like Hellboy, mate. I don't know. I think it's that's one of those films we actually didn't review at the time. We should probably review that one
Yeah.
day with Hellboy films, but
I think it was because my consensus was pretty much it was just dumb fun, and I think it was
yeah.
too dumb and too illogical to even dissect the plot whatsoever, other than this doesn't work, this doesn't work. And sometimes, like, you get to a certain point where you're reviewing something, and if you're picking too much apart, you're just like, oh, I just seem like a sourpuss a bit.
But no, I know what you mean, mate, because like I think I don't know. I'm sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place here because I actually really like David Harbour in other roles. It's just here I just think the I don't know, the humor is just not for me, mate, to be honest with you, in this film.
Yeah, personally, I think the comedy shines strongest with Florence Pugh.
Yeah.
I think she, in agreement with you, I think she's an incredible addition to the MCU. And I'm really gonna miss Natasha though.
Yeah, I
Like the
do.
the fact that she isn't alive only really sunk in with this movie. Avengers Endgame, in the points where I was meant to feel emotional, even when I watched it recently, it just felt like manipulation by the directors. I didn't really feel anything when I saw that film. Uh, but when I watched this film, and that fact, we're our attention is drawn to that fact. But throughout the film, because you're thinking, that this is sort of her final character defining mission, and it did just kind of break my heart a little because I fell in love with this character in this film. Really, she's been in better films, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, especially, and she's been better in other better films. But it was this film, and I
Yeah.
think it was the level of enrichment of her character backstory that helped me get to this place. But I don't know, I just love
Yeah,
the
mate,
character
she's
so much,
incredible.
and I'm really gonna miss her.
I agree. Like Scarlett Johansson's probably one of my. I think she's probably up there with like my favorite actresses. Like she's absolutely incredible, and like there's a reason why she's like the highest grossing actress of all time, movie wise. She's very talented, and we've reviewed loads of her films. I just think I think with her character as well in the MCU, like Black Widow is probably the most underrated Avenger in terms of she's tonally consistent throughout each film, which is rare with other directors. You know what I mean? Like, and I think Scarlett Johansson does such a great job as the character, and I'm really going to be sad to see her go because, like, it seems so weird. Like Iron Man 2 feels like decades ago, to be honest. Like I know it was only 10 years ago, but it's sad to see all these sort of like childhood icons and heroes sort of like leave the universe. Chris Evans, Robert Downey Jr., Scarlett Johansson. Yeah, it's an end of an era really, and it's never really been seen before. So I'm sad to see her go. Sad to see her go as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be seeing, Hawkeye return in his series this year, and we're going to be seeing Hulk, in She-Hulk. But he's already not the Hulk anymore. And then every other original Avenger is passing the baton to a new iteration. We're getting Ironheart. We have Yelena Belova. We're getting Kate Bishop. We now have She-Hulk. We're getting we're getting Natalie Portman's Jane Foster, potentially becoming
Yeah.
the new Thor. The mighty Thor from the comics.
Yeah.
And who am I forgetting? Captain America.
Probably Spidey, probably, and
We've seen him pass the baton to Sam Wilson.
yeah.
So yeah, Spider-Man is, he's not of the original six, but he's the closest thing to having stuck around, him and Doctor Strange, I suppose. But
It's
I'm really gonna miss the original six.
I absolutely agree, mate. And like it's only really hit home, you know, in these sort of movies that yeah, this is the last time we'll probably see Scarlett Johansson as the character, which is sad as well because like from what I hear, like she does a lot of her own stunts as well. Like she's given a lot to the character. Um and yeah, I mean it'll be sad. It'll be sad to see her go. It really will. Um in regards to non-spoiler points, mate, I don't have any more to say. Anything from yourself?
I've got a little bit.
Yeah.
Uh, I love how this is filmed. It's something that doesn't really get discussed in Marvel films because I don't think cinematography is whatsoever on their radar. They're like,
Mm,
they're about costuming and about storytelling, script writing.
yeah.
And all their movies look good in a resolution way. But when you watch Captain America: Civil War, I mean, for many chunks of it does not look pleasant cinematography wise. If
Yeah, I
you look
agree.
at the airport battle, it is
There's actually a
the
video
the
on
the
YouTube that breaks that down, like, and they've just sapped all the color from that scene. It's not. Have you
yeah
seen that one? Yeah.
yeah, it's called something like why the MCU is so ugly or something.
Yeah, and it is. It's
You
very
know,
gray. It's very bland. This film has color to it. It's got like a nice
yeah,
red crimson dynamic as well.
yeah, and a lot of the angles, I would say that this film is almost entirely composed of wide angles, and it's filmed almost like a Mission Impossible film, which
Yeah.
I think perfectly lines up tonally. It has sort of the MacGuffin and the crew that's built up. That it is very Mission Impossible esque, and if you're looking for dumb, fun popcorn action film, a Mission Impossible film is right where you want to be. So I'd say
Yeah.
the MCU having that comparison probably isn't too much of a hit to their ego. But, a lot of this film, I think the closest comparison I could give it to the rest of the MCU is probably the early Bucky scenes in Civil War. Whenever say Captain America goes to warn Bucky that the Black Panther is on his trail. I think those scenes within that apartment,
Yeah.
there are similar shades in this film to that, but once again with a much richer color palette.
Yeah, definitely. That's such an underrated point. Actually, it's such a great thing because I think the action in this film is also very well shot. Like, you've got your classic sort of really quick cuts, but it's interspersed there with like, wide shots that let you see what's going on. And there's some intelligent, shots in here as well. And I think overall, although the action scenes are uninspiring, the way they're shot isn't. Like the way they're shot is very, very good. And I actually think the music in the film is actually very good. The score,
Hmm.
the score is, in the same way, like the score is supposed to enhance the scene, and I think it did for the most part. And
Yeah,
yeah, and with that, yeah, I think to be fair to the action scenes, although they weren't for me, I think the action scenes they increase in stakes, like they get bigger as they go on. Like you don't want to film like um to like climax them with the first action scene and then just disappoint in the other two. You know what I mean? Like that's a big no-no. And this film definitely didn't do that. Like the best action scene is definitely reserved for the end, in my opinion. Which
hmm.
is always good to see for me anyway, because I don't like a film that sort of peaks in the first 20 minutes or whatever.
Yeah. I think pretty much every opinion we have today is the inverse of each other because I do wholly disagree. The action is few and far between, and I think it's all great. But my favorite would be probably the first big set piece.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I mean,
Which we may get around to talking to in the spoiler section. But yeah, when it comes to music, there is an opening credit sequence here, which is very uncharacteristic of
yeah, it was
Marvel.
quite bizarre.
But almost in the style of a Zack Snyder film. And the choice of song for that I thought was really incredible, and it really portrayed where Natasha is, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, and one thing I will credit the film for, like I say this all the time in the podcast, but like I like to see just characters just on their own doing normal stuff, and like you do get a fair bit of that in the opening portion of the movie. Like I just like to see MCU characters just because they're so engaging and they're so well developed for the most part. Like just having them just chill in their apartment, just eating food is interesting to me. As such, I know that probably makes no sense to people, but like I could happily watch a movie of like Captain America exploring like a modern New York City. You know what I mean? Like
Mm,
and you know what I mean? And yeah, and the same could be said here. Like, there's a lot of scenes like Scarlett Johansson's character, more in the open because as the film develops and more characters added into the mix, I think she actually gets a bit less to do because there's a lot more characters you need to balance there, of course. But I think the film is strongest when she's on her screen herself and she just has to carry the scene. And she could definitely, Scarlett Johansson can definitely do that. You know what I mean? And because she's a great actress. Um, so yeah, I just like to see I like to see just her like owning her presence on screen, and I think she did that when she's on her own in the film, which isn't enough because I would like to see her just on her own a bit more. But yeah,
yeah, absolutely. And what one thing I am a big fan of is comic to film adaptations. And we get some great costumes, some not so great costumes. We'll talk about Taskmaster, I think mostly in the spoiler
yep,
area. But Black Widow's costumes themselves actually surprised me. White famously does not look good on film, but somehow they managed to make her sort of winter outfit look fantastic.
yeah, it looks
I
great.
I thought it looked incredible. Even Sam Wilson's Captain America costume, it's a bit too white. It looks a bit goofy. But here, her suit's entirely white, and they somehow made it work. It may just be against the backdrop with which it appears, but somehow it really works.
Yeah, I think the MCU credit to Kevin Feige and the production behind all these films because like it seems like they're really leaning into the comic accuracy and a more sort of vibrant costumes, which is great to see. Like I think they're gonna have a real problem with like how they even sort of handle She-Hulk CGI wise as well. Like that,
Yeah, I was thinking
that's
about this the other day.
because I think that's a character where unless you have like a Gina Carano style, sort of really muscular sort of UFC fighter who's tall as well, like it's really difficult to pull that off. Um,
Yeah,
so I'd be very intrigued to see how they handle that. But even
yeah,
with
because
that, yeah,
it if the TV show is strictly like a legal comedy and action doesn't even come into it, you could just have Tatiana Maslany painted green and she's just in like a business suit for the entire series, and that absolutely works.
mhm.
But then if you're showing her like before and after, presumably we're gonna get to see the accident which put her in the position where she needed the blood transfusion from Bruce. So if we're seeing Tatiana Maslany before and then seeing her after, and the only difference is she's been painted green, that could be an issue. But then
Yeah,
how do you support having an entirely CGI character for 10 episodes of a television show, and it's
yeah,
the principal character?
because
It does just seem to create quite a few issues.
and the character famously stays in that form. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So it will be difficult to sort of work on that. But with Black Widow, yeah, the costume, yeah, the white looks great. It really works in the environment as well with that middle scene there. And I mean, yeah, I still prefer the old sort of like Iron Man 2 sort of more shield style costume because I'm not a big fan of the one at the end of this film, but I mean, yeah, like the costumes in the MCU, Red Guardian and Taskmaster, I think we could that's fair to talk about in non-spoiler because they're in the marketing. Um, so I actually think both of them look really, really good, really, really good. Taskmaster is a bit of a variation from the comics because it's a bit more kind of, how would I say, it's a bit more like RoboCop or something like that. It's a bit more sort of machine like, but it's still really, really good. I really like it.
Yeah, I think within the context of the film, it absolutely works. But we'll talk about it, a lot more in spoilers. But visually, uh, it's a very poor adaptation of the comics. If
Yeah, it
you're
is.
trying to
Yeah.
say that's a translation, it's a very poor translation. But that's obviously their intention.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about it further in spoilers. But I had my issues with that. But Red Guardian, I think, looks incredible. If you're saying that this is a Soviet version of Captain America, I
Yeah,
think they've absolutely nailed
it's
that.
marvelous. Yeah,
And
it is.
yeah, and the Taskmaster character is one that is currently generating a lot of discussion. Put simply, because it is heavily spoilery to talk about. Simply, were you a fan of how they handled it or not?
I can't really say because the point that I want to sort of explain my thoughts will have to be used in spoilers. But for people who just want to watch this as non-spoiler, I
Yeah,
will say
for a yes no binary, did you like what they did with it?
I think it's interesting what they did with it. It's definitely not what I expected. But that being said, like they did it in a way where there's possibilities to retract it, if you know what I mean. That's all I'll say. Although if I were
Yeah,
gonna say, if someone had told me this on paper and I hadn't seen the film, I'd be like, no, that sucks. On paper, it sounds shit. Uh,
yeah.
n- if we're gonna go for the massive hit piece of shit, it's a piece of shit twist, is what it is.
Okay.
But yeah, what are you? What about you, Callum?
You know, I am a little conflicted. You know, I hope this, nothing that we've said has spoiled anything. Uh, how they handled it within the film, I appreciated. That's all I'll
Yeah,
say.
I will agree. I will agree. It's hard to talk about this one. Any more points from yourself, mate?
This whole film is really about family. A begrudging family dynamic.
Fast and
And
Furious style.
in that way, it almost felt like a Disney animated film of this group that is somehow drawn together. They share something special, and I really appreciated that. There was a lot of heartwarming elements to this film, and
Yeah,
I think
can
that
agree.
that went a far way in salvaging it for me.
Yeah, it actually reminded me of like, The Incredibles in a way,
Hmm.
without giving too much away. It's got like that Fast and Furious family dynamic there. And it is it's yeah, it's kind of it's a mishmash of everything. It's espionage, it's action, it's family, it's just loads of stuff. And I can see why it works for some people. It's just for me, it's not what I would have done with the character in the last iteration of Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow. But I think it's not the worst film. Is that yeah, I maybe I've been overly harsh. It's not the worst MCU film. I don't think. There's still plenty to be enjoyed here. That's such like a
This is so
backhanded
much more
compliment.
brutal than I expected. I'm not gonna lie.
It's because yeah, I say things a lot more dryly than I mean. Like in my heart, I mean well. Like I don't mean this film any hate. I hope people don't misinterpret this as me hating on the character or anything because there's a lot to be liked here. It's just not for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll be doing an MCU tier list at some point. Where we
Yeah,
can maybe, walk back some of the comments we've made on previous films, and cement our perceptions. Because with the Thor films, I probably gave them, a proper shitting on before, and rewatching them very recently. The first Thor, incredible. Second Thor, perfectly adequate. A lot better than what people say. Even Malekith, perfectly admirable villain, served his purpose. Nothing, nuanced or incredible, but perfectly serviceable.
yeah,
Not even not even adequate. Perfectly decent. And then of course Thor Ragnarok,
yeah, mate.
incredible as always. So I think we'll have a lot of positive things to say.
I think so.
But when it comes to non spoilers, well, one final thing, massive hater piece of shit. I genuinely don't know what you're going to say here.
Can I say if I'm gonna, I would say okay. Is it gonna piss off maybe a few people? I would say piece of shit, but I will, I will retroactively comment on that remark by saying it's a good piece of shit in the sense that like, this is where the rating system is maybe
Has its limitations.
yeah, because I would say it's a piece of shit in the terms of I can't say it's great. I can't say I loved it. I can't
Yeah.
force myself to say that. But I don't hate it. Like it's not a piece of shit like garbage.
I
I
mean,
would
is
happily
that how
rewatch
you
this.
feel about like most Fast and Furious films?
Yeah, but yeah, because I have high expectations with Marvel, whereas Fast and Furious, like I judged it on harshly, probably to quote Thanos, I judged it harshly. So I think with the MCU, because there's such strong ground and you know, I have such nostalgia for it, I'm just going to be naturally a bit more harsh on it. So I think for me, it's going to be a piece of shit. But you know, I will sort of counteract that by saying, you know, it's maybe like a 6 out of 10. You know, it's not like horrendous. You know what I mean? It's still like a
Mm.
6.5 sort of thing. What about you, mate?
Yeah, I managed to talk my dad up from I think it was a 5 to a 6. You know, because you know we walked out of it and he said, meh. And I was like, well, I mean, you know, we saw Wonder Woman 1984, and I said to him, you know, I mean, it was better than Wonder Woman, surely. And he did concede that point to me. Just out of curiosity, because they are I believe the two most recent superhero films to come out of Marvel and DC. So which would you say you preferred?
Definitely Wonder Woman 84. I really like
Jeez,
that. I really, really
wow.
like Wonder Woman 84. This is like we're just we for viewers that don't know as well, we're doing like a podcast on sex work films after this as well. And Caleb and I have just been disagreeing on points today because there's one film in that trio that I really hate and Caleb loves it somehow.
Yeah, it's a good thing that we're many miles away from each other.
Many miles away. Oh my god. But yeah, mate. I'm sensing it's a massive hit then.
It's a massive hit for me. You know, we of course have restricted ourselves with the two extremes as our rating system. But you know, you know, I wouldn't say I loved it, but I really enjoyed it. I appreciated, you know, every you know, move they decided to make within the context of the film. You know, I don't always need it. A big event film, in fact, you know, sometimes I really appreciate the break from it. You know, Shang-Chi will probably be the closest thing to that sort of break from event films, as we're going to see for a while, because you know, the Eternals is cosmic. Spider-Man
Yeah.
3 is supposedly a Spider-Verse film. I'm trying to work myself down from expecting Toby and Andrew to appear
I'll be
because,
so gutted if
you
they're
know,
not.
well, if they're not the same Spider-Man, don't even bother. And if they are the same Spider-Man and they're in it for 5 minutes, it's something, but it's not great. And you know, I'm trying to talk myself down because I don't think it'll ruin the film for me if they're not there. I think the multiverse Sinister Six, which is obviously happening, should be enough to not
Yeah.
make me like, you know, an emotional wreck.
Mhm.
But you know, after that, you know, we have you know, Thor, Love and Thunder, and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Like you know, the rest of this phase are just all wild films. You know,
I agree,
there's
yeah.
nothing where we sort of get a break or you know a breather. I guess that's what the Disney Plus what the Disney Plus shows are. You know, that's meant to be the sort of non-event breather situation because I suppose Hawkeye isn't going to be a huge deal, and you know, Miss Marvel maybe isn't going to be a huge deal at least for the wider scope of the MCU.
Yeah, I mean, like it's certainly the films anyway are going to be huge for the next few years. I mean, there's a couple. I've got to be honest, man. Like, it's so funny how marketing can change a film because before that Shang-Chi trailer dropped like the other week, I was not hyped for it whatsoever. But that trailer was class. Like, it looks wonderful. The Eternals is the one where I'm a bit iffy, where like that could be the MCU's like first big flop in my opinion. Like, it's a risky move.
Ooh.
But that being said, I think there's still a lot to be excited for there. You
Yeah,
know,
I
and
mean,
there's some amazing
it could
actors.
easily be the new Guardians of the Galaxy
Yeah, it could
easily.
because and there's some amazing like, you know, I think like Salma Hayek, Angelina Jolie are that on those films, like and like Kit
Hmm.
Harington as well. Like there's some big um actors in there, so that'll be exciting.
And Gemma Chan was a good enough actress for them to cast twice.
Yeah, there you go, there you go. Yeah, like Jimon Honsu style in the DC. Um,
Hmm.
I think, mate, you know, we'll dive straight into spoilers here. I think the big one is Taskmaster if you want to get that
Yeah,
off the bat.
I've said to you, Taskmaster notes comprise a third of my notes
Well, let's
for
get
the
into it,
entire
mate.
film.
Let's
You
get
know,
into it.
I'm sure we'll race through them, but like text wise, it is a lot. I'll be honest.
Well, hit me, mate. What's your thoughts on it? What's your thoughts?
So, you know, I was trying to avoid everything I could for this film. You know, I saw the first trailer when it came back, when it came out over a year and a half ago.
Hmm.
So since then, I hadn't seen anything, and you know, I'd heard suspicions as to who Taskmaster was going to be. Personally, I thought it was going to end up being Rachel Weisz.
So did I.
You know, I'd heard
So did I.
people thinking it was going to be, you know, you know, Natasha's friend who procures things for her throughout the film. You know, so I heard going in the Taskmaster was somewhat controversial, and I was like, okay, there's two ways that this character could be controversial. Either it's a robot or they're a woman, and it turned out to be the latter. I was not massively surprised when that happened. I was surprised by the identity, but not the theme of the twist itself. So I knew going into it, Taskmaster was somewhat controversial because of a tweet that Grace Randolph posted, which I mean, you know, when the film had just come out, maybe she shouldn't have. You know, personally, I've always been a fan of Taskmaster. Whenever I would watch, Ultimate Spider-Man, and he had the voice of Clancy Brown. I found that character really incredible. But I think the twist works completely within the context of the film. But as soon as you step outside of the movie and consider the character's history, you recognize what a monumental waste of an amazing
I
character it
absolutely
is.
agree. I absolutely
You
agree.
know, I think this character had the potential to be the next Winter Soldier, and I think the gender flip is absolutely fine. But the biggest issues for me are the lack of screen time, the relegation to a hench person, and the suit, and the lack for future potential appearances, because I think they pretty much shut the door for that when she regains her consciousness.
I absolutely agree, mate. I think for me, as the film was progressing, I think before the film, I was like, okay, it's Rachel Weisz's character, definitely. As the film went on, I was like, okay, it's definitely a robot. Like that's going to be the twist. And if that was the case, I would have been absolutely furious.
Hmm.
But I think the twist
This is slightly better
yeah,
than a robot.
in the context of the film, I just think the twist is quite good. I think the twist makes sense in regards to the film. But if you take a step back, like you said, as the MCU as a whole, and think they really just bottled that there, because like that is like that's like one of the only sort of B list, sort of A list characters they had really left to sort of like a villain wise that they could really use. And in a way, from what I was saying in non-sport, like I think they could make this I think they could definitely twist this round to make sure to ensure that the character does come back. Like I think you could easily have that character as another identity. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
I just feel like with this film, they just wasted it in the fact that, like you said, it's like a henchman rather than
Hmm.
rather than like the big bad. I don't know, mate. Like I just feel that I just feel like that character really could have been used for like the Thunderbolts or something, or like even in the comics, I think Taskmaster trains like the Young Avengers. So like I think that could have been a really sort of he could have been like or he or she, whoever they could choose to make the character again, could have been used to kind of, like just like a recurring character in the films. I don't think that that's a one movie villain whatsoever. And with that, I think it's such a weird twist because it works completely in context of the film. It makes sense. It's actually pretty good, but I
Hmm.
just think in the future for the character, and if they want to, I think it just limits them for future ideas. I know I'm rambling a bit there, but it just limits them for what they can do with the character. I just hope they bring the character back because I think there's so much potential there to be used. Not with the same identity. That being said.
Yeah, Taskmaster has never been, an outright Black Widow villain.
Mm,
He's never had major ties to the character of Natasha Romanoff. So
mm,
the fact they were able to, you know, take this villain, you know, intrinsically link the character to Black Widow's past,
mm,
and make a well executed character arc, whether it was the one we wanted or not, it was well executed within the context of what they wanted to achieve. It's very commendable. You know, one thing I did not like whatsoever is that it's tech rather than powers. Because then, in that situation, anyone could wear it. I think the concept
yeah.
is that Dracov's daughter, is essentially now the best Black Widow. She's the perfect living weapon. If it's just the tech analyzing it and then the suit doing the fighting with her in it, and it's
Mm,
just essentially an iron lung keeping her alive, then the powers could be executed by anyone, which makes the character so much less important. You
yeah.
know, so that the tech rather than the powers, the suit, that the fact they were a hench person, the fact they aren't actually evil. It was just a whole host of issues I had. You
Yeah,
know,
mate.
there's a certain level of importance to the storyline that the widows, a certain section of the widows are actually mind controlled rather than just uh, you know mind, that they're mind controlled rather than brainwashed. which is the distinction between Yelena and Natasha. You know, because Yelena is actually, she's able to be woken up from her from her killer instinct, rather than, she was just subjected to brainwashing. You know, the mind control and the widows I'm fine with, because I don't think they have to be complicit in their actions for the characters to have depth.
Yeah.
Them being puppets who are freed by the end, I think, is a good enough arc. But they essentially just gave Taskmaster the same story as Ghost from Ant-Man and the Wasp, where there was an explosion that limited their life, and
Yeah.
now they need this suit to survive, and then
It's a
they're
copy and
exploited
paste
by
dynamic.
then they're exploited by this person in a superior position to them. So it just felt, where they should have been the Winter Soldier, a character that has lasted multiple films and has been given some of the greatest depth of all the characters in the MCU. They gave it to Ghost, a character that
Yeah.
no one remembers from a film that I love, but no one else
I
did.
actually forgot
You
about that
know,
character until you mentioned it.
yeah.
As well.
So whenever you're able to easily compare those two, you should probably think that you've wasted this character. Admittedly, I didn't feel like this was a traditional third act, but I didn't have a problem, because that's really where Dreykov appears, and that's where Taskmaster is revealed. It didn't feel like a traditional third act, but I didn't have a problem with it, because uh you know because I think the action in the movie is so well done, despite what you may think. I think if you wanted the Taskmaster character to be linked to Black Widow's past, there were a few more options for it. There's a suggestion that I had, which would be my perfect fix to the scenario, where it's kind of a blending of respectful to the comics, but also makes as much sense, in connection to Black Widow's past as this does here. So I've referred it to my notes as my perfect fix.
Okay. Let's hear it.
Within the movie, I didn't have a big problem with either. I don't want to come across like any of my issues with this character had to do with the gender swap, because that genuinely for me
Doesn't come into
does
it,
not
yeah.
come into it.
Mhm.
It was the suit, the powers, the story, and then making them a good guy by the end, who was just subjected to this unwillingly. So within the movie, didn't have a problem with the gender flip, but I do always hear that whenever I see Taskmaster, because of my experiences, less so with the comics and more with animation,
Yeah.
I always hear Clancy Brown's voice. So removing that ability to speak, I mean, we don't even hear Taskmaster speak in this movie. They don't have a voice when they're attacking Natasha, and then the character doesn't speak until she has one line at the very end where she asks whether her father is actually dead this time. So I can't really step aside from Clancy Brown's voice. So it's a bit of a letdown. But in the context of the universe, for me, the perfect fix would be that in Budapest, Dreykov really did die, and the Red Room was abolished, and then years later it was started up again, rather than it just having never gone away. I think having it start up again, but with Taskmaster, at the helm of it, who is still Dreykov's daughter. This time, the character is called Tony Masters in the comic. Call her Antoinette.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem. I think if
Good,
you're gonna
that's good.
say,
Yeah.
I think if you're gonna say this is Taskmaster, this is the definitive Taskmaster. Give us something, because I mean, let's
Yeah.
be honest, Tony Masters, stupid name anyway. So the link to the past remains, but this time, it's out of vengeance instead of subservience. I think it creates more of a scope for action sequences, because for whatever reason, just Ray Winstone like walking around an office, happens for
Yeah,
25
I
minutes,
mean,
where you're just like,
definitely.
she should be fighting Taskmaster. Like, what is happening here?
And there's not
So
really a you go ahead, sorry mate, go ahead. Go ahead.
so it creates more scope for action sequences, makes Taskmaster the outright villain of the piece, but adds complexity because it's due to Natasha's actions that they are this way. That would then allow them to be an anti-hero in the future. To me, it's a little less surprising. You don't get a twist. I was genuinely surprised in the cinema. Not that Taskmaster was a woman, but who the woman was. So it's a little less surprising. But I think you can fix that by just padding the film out with red herrings.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, mate. I think that's a great sort of way to put it, because I think for me a lot of the film is wasted in building up to action scenes that never happen. I mean, Black Widow and Taskmaster barely get a major confrontation in the film. Neither
Mm,
do Red Guardian and Taskmaster, which I was really disappointed about, because Red Guardian throughout the film. He's boasting about how he's he's the strongest. So he's like he's beat Captain America, all these things, and whenever he goes to fight Taskmaster, it cuts away to Rachel Weisz's character or Florence Pugh's character, so it's a real waste there. And I think if you just make Taskmaster the head of the new Red Room, it fixes it completely. It creates more of like a status of that character where you don't want to mess with her. You know what I mean? Like I feel like with having her as an underling, you kind of lose authority there as the villain presence, in a way.
Yeah.
And with Dreykov, like I think you could just put him into any Liam Neeson film and he wouldn't look out of place. Like it's a terrifically cliched character that I wasn't a fan of, mate, to be honest with you. I really didn't like him, to be honest with you. I think the whole pheromone thing is interesting. Like the Black Widows can't hurt him because of the whatever aftershave he puts on or whatever. But I think it was just a bizarre.
Is it just that he stinks so much they don't want to come that close to
Yeah,
him?
potentially because like he's clearly a disgusting human being. But I mean, yeah, I think just the bottle Taskmaster, mate, in terms of having her as like an underling to Dreykov. You know what I mean? I think Taskmaster is a villain of his or her movie. You know what I mean? Depending on like what identity you give the character next. I hope there is a possibility for that character to return. It's just that like we're kind of saying, like every time it builds up to a big confrontation, it cuts away or it just doesn't want to show you it for some reason. And yeah, I mean, I think I was actually quite surprised when they kind of pulled that twist of Natasha actually killed Dreykov's daughter. I was like, wow, like that sort of goes back to her cold-hearted killer days or whatever. But I mean, yeah, and with that, I was hoping for a potential Jeremy Renner appearance in here, and also with that, I could have swore Robert Downey Jr. was confirmed to be in this film. I could have swore he
See, he
was.
was he was he was rumored, and then on the Wikipedia they had him down, which they don't usually do unless there's confirmation. Because I was just sort of Wikipedia browsing the other day, and a couple days before the film was released, that was still on his Wikipedia. So yeah, I was sort of looking out for him the entire film, and then
Yeah,
then it never came. I mean, I don't think it was ever officially confirmed by a trade, and Robert Downey Jr. flat out denied it. So I can't imagine they would, cut a cameo from Robert Downey Jr.,
yeah.
especially if they would have to pay him, an obscene amount of money. They probably want to at least cash in on that.
Yeah, and I'm glad they didn't bring him back because I thought the ending for Iron Man was pretty ideal, to be honest with you. I'm sort of glad they didn't ruin that moment. Um, yeah, I think this is going to be a film where my thoughts might change in a year or two's time. You know what I mean? It's a difficult because we're reviewing this quickly after reviewing it. My thoughts are so fresh, and I really hope it just depends what they do with the characters as well. I think I like the little explanation of like the green sort of vest jacket that Scarlett Johansson or Black Widow rocks in Infinity War, and the reason behind that being Yelena's jacket. And I just would have liked more time with Florence Pugh and Scarlett Johansson interacting, because I think that's where the film shines the best, when the characters are just chatting. There's a fun gag about
Hmm.
Scarlett Johansson. I have saying Scarlett Johansson as if she's a character. Black Widow like rocking the poses and stuff in the films. Like that's a funny sort of
Hmm.
discussion there. And I think there's a character that Black Widow sort of interacts with throughout the film that I'm not too sure. He like helps her out and stuff, like with accommodation and transport. I don't know what his name is,
Yeah,
but
couldn't tell you.
I thought he would have been a good sort of Taskmaster twist. I think that would have been
Yeah,
interesting
I
enough.
mean, Grace Randolph sort of put forward that she thinks that Marvel intentionally cast him as a red herring, because I mean he's on all the posters, and you
Yeah,
think, okay, I mean logically, who could be Taskmaster, and you would think it would be a main or supporting character, but when it's a character we haven't even seen before,
yeah,
aside from a brief shot of her in the building right before it's blown up, so it was very odd, but I appreciated it again within the context of the film, not outside of it, as an adaptation. But with the Budapest scene, we get 30 seconds of what is presumably what for what presumably would have made an incredible sequence. I really loved the opening credits of the film, and I enjoyed the opening scene as I watched it. With the childhood that was shared between Yelena and Natasha, along with Alexei and Melina. But famously, you should show not tell. So just by mostly talking about Budapest, that was pretty much a letdown because we've been hearing about it, ever since 2012 with the Avengers. And I feel like that as an opening, and then the family history being what is spoken about, to me would have been a better idea.
Yeah, I
Because I
agree.
think you can much more quickly infer, history between family members than you can, this important, turning point decision
I agree,
that
mate.
Black Widow had. If that was the opening sequence, it not only sets up the villain for later reference, but it also opens the film with a bang. I mean, I think an action sequence with her and Clint, using their individual weapons and taking down a whole army of people is a much more engaging opening than you know a plane trying to get away.
I actually made note of that was the first sort of note I had put. Me, I think for an MCU, when I think of MCU films, I think of engaging openings. Your Avengers End games. Those kind of openings where it's like you're gripped to the screen. This opening is entirely. It's not good. It's just entirely. It feels like it's building up some kind of like espionage sort of twist, and it's not
Mm.
really. It's never really it's never really properly explained why the police are after them. Really, it's a
I
waste.
think it was that they had stolen this technology from Shield that was eventually adapted to create the microbes that would then mentally affect the indoctrinated widows, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think a Budapest opening would have been better just to engage me in it, mate, to be honest. And it all boils down to this film for me is like just squandered and wasted potential. Like, I think there's so much potential in this film for like a Budapest scene or things like that, or for a better Taskmaster twist, or more give just giving David Harbour more to do rather than just telling jokes. Like,
Hmm.
I don't know, I just it just frustrated me because I think there is so much good stuff in here that I liked, and it could have been so much better if you just change a few things. Like General Ross, like I don't know what they're doing bringing him into the film because like for all he is, like he's not like he's barely in it, but like at the same time, give me more. You know what I mean? Like if you're gonna include him for more and have him just give him more to do. I just felt for me, I just would have loved to see that whole Thunderbolt thing come more into play in this film rather than for an end credits, which I suppose we could talk about if you wanted. Um,
Yeah, I think in just a moment, because you mentioned David Harbour, and he doesn't get a lot of broad scope with comedy, but he
mm,
does have my favorite moment in the entire film,
okay,
which is his rendition of American Pie.
it's good. Yeah,
And I was
very
just,
Tyson
I'm
Fury esque.
baffled that by this point, a very notable franchise hasn't already used American Pie as its film's theme. Because we've seen this before in previous MCU films where they have sort of a principal song that comes back around. The Guardians films are littered with them, but then the second one really drills into the meaning and the significance of brandy. And
Yeah,
in this film, just the moment where he sang American Pie, it broke my heart a little. And
it's a good song.
I just find it so beautiful. I wouldn't say the verge of tears, but I was on the verge of tears. And David Harbour gave some explanation because it was apparently his idea. I mean, you can't necessarily believe that because it may just be you know the idea of him having come up with that is a good PR story. But he said that it was pretty much his idea to have the character, you know, have that small connection with Yelena at the beginning, and then him singing that was sort of his way of saying, "Yeah, I was a terrible father. I'm a terrible person, but I did the best that I could with the terrible personality that I was dealt with."
Yeah, like it's a really sweet addition as well, and it gives that development that was needed. And yeah, like it reminded me of like when Tyson Fury started singing that song after he
Oh
won
God,
against Deontay Wild. Have you seen that clip?
I have seen it. Like,
That
does he
bit's a
do
bit
the
more
full
cringe
eight
than this.
minutes?
Yeah, I know.
Does
Um,
he do the full 8 minutes, or did he
he
do
does a
a
few
bit
minutes,
of an
like, or
abridged version?
he does more than a couple minutes, I think. Yeah, it's quite a lot. Um, yeah, I mean, I think for me, there's certain aspects of Red Guardian that I really liked. I would have liked to see him like just beat up with a few more guys in prison. Like I thought that was a fun dynamic there. And it's pretty cool to see that like he seems to get like a lot of fan mail from the people
Hmm.
in Russia, like action figures and stuff. But yeah. In regards to the end credit scene, mate, did you want to talk
Mhm.
about that? Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. What was your thoughts on that? Because obviously, I think Valentina, it brings back Valentina
Hmm.
from the Falcon and Winter
Yeah.
Soldier. It definitely seems like they're really leading into the Thunderbolts or the Dark Avengers or something, which is strange because like they had Thunderbolt Ross in this movie and absolutely did nothing with him, which is bizarre because I think they could have really had him at the end there as well.
Yeah, this was the moment that I was really talking about in the non-spoiler section where it really got to me the idea that this is Scarlett Johansson's last MCU film because
Mhm.
the scene involves Yelena visiting her grave, and you sort of mentioned that Scarlett Johansson doesn't even get much screen time in her own solo film, and she barely speaks. Like her dialogue is very limited, and there's a moment where Yelena whistles in the style that they did as kids,
Yeah.
and I honestly, based on the MCU, I would not have been surprised if she walked out from behind a tree at the cemetery. Uh, you know, and when she didn't, I did feel quite sad. But obviously, if that had happened, I would have been like, "Oh, fuck off." But famously, people criticized Avengers Endgame for not really giving her the respect that she deserved. She doesn't get a funeral. They don't really mourn her, especially not to the degree that they do Tony. There was a deleted scene in Avengers Endgame where they all, kneel for Tony, and he didn't even give as big a sacrifice as Black Widow did because she did that not knowing that that would mean certain winning. It
Yeah.
was just she just sacrificed herself for hope. But Iron Man knew if I snap my fingers, we're all good, everybody's good,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be a hero. But she was like, oh well, the world might not even remember me because half of it's gone, and who knows whether we're gonna get it back. So
Yeah. It's
to
a great
see that
point,
she
mate.
has this like shitty little regular person tombstone when she should have like a monument built to her was just wow, they're just continuing to disrespect this character.
I
And
know.
I guess that's maybe a choice by the filmmakers to say that because she's referred to as that there's a distinction made between her and the big ones when it comes to the Avengers by Yelena. And I suppose maybe that's the director's making a conscious choice to say that she was sort of disrespected in her time, and she's even disrespected in death.
And that's why I find our character so, so fantastic is because like she doesn't have any abilities, but she's just a great character. You know what I mean? Like she stands on her own, and she's such an empowering lead as well. And yeah, it is. When you say that, I mean, it really does put it into perspective. Like um, they really should have dealt with that in a better way. Obviously, you've got like the Avengers like warning her privately, before the big battle, but that's not really enough for me because that character is like a definitive MCU character in my opinion. Like in the top five most iconic, probably in the top five most iconic superhero characters in Marvel movie history. You know what I mean? Like she's that popular, she's that great, and yeah, saying that little sort of tombstone, like part of me hopes they try to explain it by saying like that was just Yelena's self-made grave for her, and she has like a big one at Avengers HQ or whatever. I hope that's what they do, but I doubt it. Yeah, mate, and with the end credit scene as well with Valentina, like they almost like immediately just play it off for jokes rather than just letting that sort of emotion set in, which I didn't really like. It surprised me that I think Scarlett Johansson's like executive producer of this, so I'd imagine she'd have some creative say in a lot of this film, and some of the choices are bizarre that I don't think she would make for the character, but I can't speak on the credibility of that obviously, but yeah, what's your thoughts on the credit scene anyway? Because it's been a while since an MCU film's come out in cinema, so this is the first end credit scene in quite some time too.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's a very low key one in comparison to the rest.
Yeah.
At least in recent years, because it's just two people having a quiet chat and then someone hands a photo to someone. So I mean, if you put it in a very simple way like that, you see that it is very simple in comparison. I mean, you know, the last film that we had from the MCU was Spider-Man: Far From Home, and that had a universe-shattering reveal of his unmasking. So
Mhm.
if you take that into context, it is uh, almost polar opposite. But it got me massively excited for the Hawkeye series.
Definitely.
Yelena is a character that I fell in love with immediately, and I don't know how that exchange would last any more than 5 seconds because Yelena seems very rational. So if he said, well, she sacrificed herself for me. That's what she would do. She'd go like, yeah, sounds like her, and then move
Yeah.
on. You
Yeah.
know, I feel like, that grudge can't possibly last long.
I hope they don't
And
draw it out.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, she can't possibly be the principal villain of that series. It'll maybe be if it's 6 episodes, maybe a 2 episode arc, or she's peppered throughout or something. I'm looking forward to seeing her, but
Definitely, yeah.
I'm wondering how that's going to work out logistically. I'd love to see her get her own film. Not necessarily a Black Widow film, because I think maybe giving her that mantle maybe wouldn't sit right with me, just because I feel like, Scarlett Johansson never really got her day in the sun as the character, because I mean, Sam Wilson is now officially Captain America, but you know, Steve got a full arc and then handed it over to someone who will now have a full arc,
Yeah.
and so the name is largely irrelevant, but I think maybe Black Widow should die with Natasha, but
Yeah.
you've mentioned Valentina is in this film, and this was initially meant to be her introduction to the MCU, because Black Widow obviously was in the can for over a year, so we were actually meant to see this before Falcon and Winter Soldier. But Falcon and Winter Soldier makes so much more sense of an introduction than this scene. They don't even say her full name in this. Elena just refers to her as Val. Like, she doesn't even say, you know, my name is Valentina, whatever the fuck, I'm whatever,
Yeah.
like she does in Falcon and Winter Soldier. So I think I would have just been confused,
The other way around. Yeah. It
because I would
almost
have just been like,
begs the
who is this?
yeah, it begs the question, like, coincidentally, it's actually worked out better that she was revealed in the show that
Yeah,
was supposed to come after this. Yeah, I know. Um, yeah, I know, mate. Like, I think for the Hawkeye TV show, I think I'm really excited to see Florence Pugh back as the character. And I think there's potential for like a Black Widows film with like Florence Pugh's character leading the Black Widows. Like that wouldn't
yeah,
that probably would be quite fresh, for to be honest. Like, hadn't really been done before, like leading a whole squad of people. I know you could sort of say like there's been like team assembled movies before, but like it's kind of a unique situation where like they're all of the same abilities and they're all the same characters, so to speak, you know what I mean, under this program. So I think that would be very interesting, or potentially like a TV show or whatever, you know what I mean. I think there's a lot of potential
yeah,
there. I just hope they don't squander it or anything like that.
yeah,
But yeah, with that, mate, I don't have any more to
yeah. I mean,
say.
so something like that, I could even.
Oh, go ahead, mate, go ahead.
I
Sorry,
mean,
I might
with
get a
with
bit
with
lighter.
your sort of Black Widow's idea, that could almost work, I guess, like Captain America and his Howling Commandos, but as a
Yeah, yeah,
as a
definitely,
as a film or a TV show in isolation of that interaction. Because I
definitely.
think a lot of people felt a bit hard done by in the first Avenger, that was just probably. I mean, it's what people said. It was a montage of what would have been a more exciting film. I think people just don't like that film, but
I love
we
it, mate.
personally
It's one of my favorite. It's probably my
really
favorite, if
love
I'm
it.
honest. I think it's class.
Yeah, I don't think I could rewatch it for a while, just because of how isolated it is from what we know now.
Mhm.
Not because I don't think it's not necessarily, it's not a small film in scale. Obviously, it being a war film, it is large in scope. It's just, it doesn't feel like the current MCU. So maybe in a few years, I think I'd go back and watch it. But in isolation, it's a film I absolutely love.
Do you almost feel, mate, like the MCU is a victim of its own success with these smaller movies? Like, if they did a Captain America, the first Avengers style film now, would the lack of connectivity like feel a bit weird to you, given that every film now has an Avenger appearing in it, or has a flashback to your previous film, or relates to the next film, or has a teaser to the next film? Like, does that does the lack of connectivity from like you know Iron Man through to Captain America, the First Avenger, and Thor, and this film for me feels like a lack of connectivity to a degree. Like, does that feel a bit strange to you? Does it?
I think going back and rewatching old stuff, it's definitely affected, and in the future, I think there's potential for issues to arise. I think uh, they've sort of artificially subverted that in Shang-Chi. Because it's obviously this introduction of this new character, and it's very specific genre that might not appeal to everybody. But the fighting sequences that we're going to see in the cage matches, between pre-existing MCU characters, is sort of the little treat that they're dangling for pre-existing fans,
Yeah,
for
definitely.
more casual fans. But I think if you removed all connections to the MCU, Shang-Chi wouldn't necessarily connect. Just because of how isolated the rest of the film seems to be, and how new and different it seems to be. I'm excited by that, but I think a lot of people want more of the same, but ramped up in excitement. But
Yeah.
I think they want the tone and themes to be the same because it is just easily digestible to a certain degree.
Yeah, definitely, Callum. Like I think it all boils down to how the production and the producers balance the mass audience that it has of casual moviegoers, but also like the diehard comic book fans. Like comic book fans, like I'm probably less so now because I don't have time to keep up with the lore now, to be honest. But like that's like it's kind of like it's like people here who enjoy fighting. Like if you do something small, like I could piss a lot of people off. Like it's not a it's not like a people sort of dynamic of people that you want to sort of you know anger, and just some people are really into their traditional sort of comic book lore that if you do a little change to a character or a little tweak, people can get frustrated. So I think it is difficult to balance that line between the diehard fans and the casual moviegoers. And I think so far, like the MCU's done that really, really well. Like I really do think it has. And this film, I think it does it well too. I mean, there's a lot to love here if you're a comic book fan. Obviously, we've mentioned the costumes, but also little Easter eggs and teasers for the next film. Although maybe that's a bit less than MCU films that what we're used to, given this is a prequel. But I think there's still a lot to be enjoyed here as well if you're a casual fan. You know what I mean? Of course
Yeah.
there is. So
I do think your enjoyment of this film hinges absolutely on whether you can swallow the Taskmaster pill.
yeah,
Whether
yeah,
I think if you are a massive comic book fan, especially a Taskmaster fan, this will just piss you off to no end.
yeah,
I'm a very casual. You know, I know a lot about the comics, without having read them, just by picking them up, through osmosis and through adaptations and stuff.
yeah,
So I'm a very casual sort of Marvel fan outside of the films. I like the TV shows. I like the animation. I know a lot about the comics, but I know I like Taskmaster, and it pissed me off to have that
yeah.
level of waste be so apparent to me.
Definitely,
So
mate.
for you to actually like love that character and that be your favorite villain, even your favorite character, that I'm sure that's it's a little bit heartbreaking that it just feels like they didn't even try. Uh, you
Yeah, mate.
know,
I know.
I mean plenty of people will have an issue with just the gender bending, like because people had a massive issue, with changing characteristics of characters before. There's a huge precedent for it, within the industry. Even with I don't think people took too much issue with changing Carl, whatever his name was. What was the name of what was the name of Carly's surname in Falcon and Winter Soldier?
Oh, Morgenthau.
Yeah, she was initially Carl Morgenthau in the comics, as the masked villain Flag Smasher. So I mean they drastically changed the character into an organization, and they changed the leader into a woman, and people didn't have any issue with that I found noticeable.
Yeah,
But I think that's because it's a noteworthy character. But a character of that with that
yeah,
notoriety,
yeah.
I think some people will take special issue with it. Because I've been actively avoiding spoilers, I haven't heard anything. But I imagine if I googled Taskmaster fan thoughts or whatever, it'd just be an outpouring of rage.
Yeah, I know, mate. It's unfortunate. I'd be really intrigued. Seven to 10 years down the line, when the MCU's kind of ran out of new characters to introduce or whatever, if they have to rely on like individual new creations or new concepts. Like I think that could be like I don't- forgive my ignorance. I'm not sure if The Boys is based on any source material, but
It
like
is.
it is okay. Then that ruins the point I'm about to make. But films like Hancock or whatever, like these sort of small superhero films where you have to come up with a new creation. Like I would like if the MCU did something like that in the future, where like the twists become less predictable because there's no source material there. If that makes sense. I
Mhm.
mean, like I think if new rock stars, maybe maybe don't get every twist right, but just by automatically going that in depth on the lore, like you're gonna get some stuff right there. You know what I mean? And fair play to them. Like there's a reason why those videos are so popular. Like we're saying, these films have a huge core audience of die-hard comic book fans. I just feel like without that lore, it opens the universe up for potential twists. Although it does maybe it's a risk financially because you know there's no sort of pre-existing fan base there for the character, if that makes sense. But I
Hmm.
definitely think it's something that could pull off 100%. Even if it
Yeah,
might be a
I
few years
mean,
down the line yet.
yeah, they've certainly tweaked villains before, especially within the MCU. Because I think that there's a lot less, you know, diehard love for certain villains. I don't think anyone gave a shit. How they adapted Ghost. There were several
Yeah.
differences from the comics, but I don't think any tears were shed. To my knowledge, have there been any
Well,
entirely new creations villains wise?
well, I'm not sure about villains, mate, but from what I'm aware, I think Agent Coulson's a totally fresh
Yeah,
character
I believe
concept,
so.
and that's worked very well given that he's his own TV show. Like, that's the evidence there that supports that. I can't think of any villains wise, mate. None really spring to mind immediately. No, nothing really jumps to mind in my head. Maybe like from there's bound to be a few henchmen in the Netflix shows that are new creations, you'd think, but
Hmm.
yeah,
I mean, it astounds me that 3 films in to the MCU, they were stumped enough to go with Whiplash as the principal villain.
I know.
Like, how little
Yeah,
source material is there to draw from Iron Man? It's like, you know, pick anyone from the MCU and sorry, pick anyone from the Marvel comics, and it probably would have been a better idea than Whiplash,
yeah,
because they had already done, in the film before, you know a guy, builds, his iteration of the Iron Man suit and then fights him. So I mean, I don't know why they went, let's just do that, but now he has Rhodey.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I know. Like, it's amazing to me that they didn't like start off with, like, I know Modok would have been quite strange to start off with, given that he's quite an unusual looking
Would
character,
have been
but
bold.
would have been bold. I'm gonna Google original MCU characters to see if there is any other than Coulson. I mean, there's bound to be a few.
Yeah, I think most of the cast of Agents of Shield are original to the show.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, they reinvented Jarvis to be like kind of an AI kind of thing, but that doesn't really count to me because it was kind of he was an assistant to Iron Man in the comics. I mean, Harley
Yeah,
Kino
they've
for Iron
definitely
Man.
done some, like,
Go ahead, mate.
yeah, they've obviously done some tweaks and alterations and amalgamations. But yeah, pure creation, it does just seem to be side characters and insignificant ones.
Yeah, Phil Coulson's probably the biggest one that springs to mind for me. But I would like to see that in the future, mate, to be honest with you, even if that is like 10 to 15 years down the line, if the universe is still going. I mean, imagine it would be, but yeah, it's mad.
I think they have to call it a day at some point. I don't think this can go on forever. Like, you can't
Yeah.
make good films for that long.
And the day it does come to an end, mate, I'll feel really sad about it, to be honest, because as much as I've criticized a lot of films in the MCU and I maybe don't like them as much as I used to, I still absolutely love each and every one of them. You know what I mean? I still love aspects of this film. I still love aspects of any of the MCU films because it's never really been seen to this magnitude before. I know we've kind of gone off on an MCU chat in this podcast, but I'm absolutely fine with it because it's important and
Hmm.
like it saddens me as well that like what one day this will be the last day we see Chris Hemsworth as Thor or Mark Ruffalo as Bruce Banner or we'll never see Chris Evans as Robert Downey Jr. again in these roles unless they do it in like a Blade Runner 2049 style or bringing back um Harrison Ford for a future movie once like the I can definitely see the MCU doing something where like they market this is the last MCU film and then 20 years after that they do like a sort of a Blade Runner 2049 situation or like a Star Wars situation by they bringing it all back together and restarting it again. Like I think that's
And it's
the
probably worse.
yeah, but I could definitely see that happening. And it's I was just thinking there, mate, on the subject of MCU characters, like and all the ones they've done, it's amazing they haven't introduced Miles Morales yet. Like that's such a
Hmm.
huge character, like with him becoming Cap in the comics as well. Like it's mad to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's been, I suppose, only 5 years since we've introduced Peter Parker,
Yeah, I
and
suppose. Yeah,
if
that's a
you
good
think
point.
about the decades that Peter Parker was around before Miles Morales' introduction. I guess it's only fitting narratively. I
Yeah.
mean, we've talked about whether it's too early for a Spider-Verse film, because I think people like the third Spider-Man film being a Spider-Verse film. That's ridiculous. But then in reality, it's if it is a Spider-Verse film, then that's the eighth Spider-Man film, because you have the three with Tobey Maguire, the two with Andrew Garfield, and
Yeah.
the three now with Tom Holland. So I mean, you know, if it's really just a piecing together and a conclusion to those three stories coming together, then I think time time wise, that's it's not spanning
Mhm.
5 years, it's spanning you know 20.
Yeah, and I tell you what, Colin, like I think there's definitely room in the future to just do a whole MCU retrospective in the films. Just going through them, because it's crazy, because 2008 is when it started, and like how many films has it been there? Like in the upwards of 20,
24 now.
24. Like it's crazy. Um, so yeah, I think there's definitely room to just do a whole retrospective on it, and like how we feel about each film now. Because like by the time the next Avengers film comes out, we'll probably be in our like early to mid 20s. You know what I mean? Which is it's crazy
Jeez.
to think. It's madness. Because yeah, crazy. But yeah, mate, have you got anything more to say in the film?
A few quick thoughts. Going in, as I said, the identity of Taskmaster surprised me, but not what they were trying to do with it. But one thing that did genuinely surprise me was the mask switcheroo, where we found out that Natasha has taken the
Yeah,
place of
yeah, that was
Melina.
good. That was good.
That surprised me massively. Like, whenever Dreykov said about looking into the eyes of the girl that he raised, I was like, well, what's he on about?
Yeah,
And it wasn't genuinely until he peeled off her mask that it clicked in my brain. So that
yeah, it was a good
like,
twist.
kudos
Yeah,
to them. They did genuinely surprise me.
definitely, mate. Definitely, it was very well done in that scene. Very well orchestrated.
And we've talked about the third act. Obviously Taskmaster has come into that a lot.
Mhm.
One big criticism that I had heard going in that gave me real pause and concern was certain criticisms leveled against the CGI.
Mhm.
And I think I try to be fair in these reviews, but honestly, I do pick apart bad CGI quite frequently. It is something that I have a problem with, because you know I think whenever you're the biggest media powerhouse in the history of the film industry, and you have infinite levels of money and time, there's kind of no
No
reason why
excuse.
you should
Yeah.
why your effects should be that bad. Because really, they say that criticism is often leveled against the VFX artists, but it is usually time constraints or money constraints. It's not their ability. Like, that's why Superman looked terrible in Joss Whedon's Justice League. If they'd been given you know tens more millions of dollars and the same amount of time,
Yeah.
or the same
Yeah.
amount of money but 6 more months, it would have looked far better. It's just that's the best they could do with the time and money. But when you're not rushed for a release date and you have a huge amount of money, I think in these movies there's no excuse. And I think the most egregious example of that is Black Panther, because I did rewatch it recently enough. My opinion entirely changed of the quality of the film. I thought it was incredible. It really turned around my opinion from when I first saw it. But the CGI is very questionable at best. So going in, I heard this. I'm already a big critic, but honestly, I'd heard the third act was video game-esque, but I genuinely took very little issue with it. Some of the
It's good.
explosions weren't 100%, but aside from that, nothing. I
Yeah.
thought it was, I think construction of a third act narrative, the fact that it ends with her falling from the sky, you know it's a weird third act, but it works. It's structured very
Doesn't feel
weirdly.
out of place. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't feel out of place, and it's not anticlimactic, and I thought it looked perfectly admirable.
Yeah, it
I
wasn't.
I had no issue with it.
Yeah, there was no. Usually with bad CGI, you spot it straight away. But like, there was nothing that I thought was bad enough that I had to comment on it and or anything like that. I thought it was absolutely serviceable. Definitely, mate. I agree. And for the most part, like the film doesn't over rely on it either. Maybe for that third act it does, because that's impossible to pull a stunt. But for the most part, I think the whole opening scene is stunt work for the most part. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So, fair play to the film. I think the best films don't heavily rely on it. The Captain America: The Winter Soldier has it here and there, especially with that third act, which is reasonably similar, but for the most part, just relies on just gritty action, and this film does as well. Um, and there's nothing wrong with CGI. Like, I actually, who doesn't like a good sort of CGI brawl? Like, I was rewatching The Incredible Hulk the other day, and the CGI is not great, but it's 2008. It wasn't perfected then, and I actually think it's good. For the time, it's good. Like, people
Yeah.
forget like how old the MC is. I think like 2008 was a long time ago. You know what I mean? Like, as
Hmm.
well. So yeah,
And I would say the Abomination does not look much better right now.
yeah.
He's a different shade of green and he has fins, but he still has a massive body and a tiny head, and it does not work for me.
His head's tiny, isn't it? Like, his head is very
Well,
small.
because he just has the head of a normal human, but then he's like 9 feet tall. It doesn't work at all.
Yeah, I know, and it's bizarre. It is bizarre.
I mean, I get he's like meant to be, a more grotesque version of the Hulk because it was. I mean, it's kind of confusing that they messed it up that badly, because the Hulk was created, through Bruce Banner trying to replicate the Super Soldier Serum, and then Abomination was created by them trying to replicate what happened to the Hulk. So they've messed up the mess up, which is just baffling. I have no idea how
Messed up the
how they
fucked
managed
it, mate.
that, but so I get he's meant to be grotesque, but the proportions are messed up.
I'd be
I would have just made him less tall because like the way he sort of towers over Wong with his like hunchback like just doesn't really look right to me in the Shang-Chi trailer.
I would be really intrigued if they get Tim Roth back. I'd be really intrigued. I think
Oh, he's coming back for She-Hulk, but I'm not sure about
that would be tight.
Shang-Chi.
Because I actually think he's obviously, like, we're sort of making our way through the Tarantino films slowly but surely, but he's actually really good in Pulp Fiction. Like, he's really good.
Mm,
He's a very talented
yeah.
actor. But yeah, mate. Any more remarks from yourself?
One very final thing,
Go
in
for it.
non-spoilers, we talked about the family dynamic, and full respect to them. I love what they build here, but if they spent the reason that Scarlett Johansson has so little screen time in this film is because they're establishing this family dynamic, but then we're never going to see that again. So what was the point? The point
Yeah.
of the Incredibles building that family dynamic is that they're reunited by the end, and then you can picture their future adventures together, and then you see their future adventures together in the Incredibles too. But here, Natasha's just dead. She's never going to see these people again. So like you've spent hours establishing a dynamic that we're never going to see again, and that they were never reunited for. So that's why this film should have come out 5 years ago when there was still a potential for a sequel starring Scarlett Johansson. Because I
Yeah.
mean, that easily this film could have come out in 2016, and then we either got Black Widow 2 2018 or 2019, before her death in Avengers Endgame. Like it was just
I had the
I'm
same
I'm just
thoughts.
sad I'm sad on Scarlett Johansson's behalf because I love her so much in this role. I think, and I love the family dynamic. It's just you know there's a vital piece ripped out of it
Yeah,
that if
it's
we then
rushed, mate.
see the three of them back together again, they're not the full family.
Yeah, it's like it's trying to condense all that Black Widow lore into one film. But that one film happens to be your last film, which is not the time and place to do that shit. You know what
Yeah,
I
what
mean? Like,
what were they doing?
yeah, and also, like, I had the same exact note, mate. Like, for a Scarlett Johansson solo Black Widow film, it's somehow a team dynamic again. Like, it's not a solo film whatsoever. She barely any screen time on her own. You know what I mean? It's with the Captain America films, like, I get you've got the Howling Commandos in the first Avenger or whatever, but you've still got little scenes of Steve Rogers, just on his own. You know what I mean? Coming to
Yeah,
grips with life or whatever. So it's weird, mate. I don't know why they thought that was the time and place to build a dynamic around the character rather than just have the character stand alone on her own 2 feet and lead the film herself. Like, I don't and don't get me
yeah,
wrong, like, I think there's merit in what they're trying to do there. Like we said, I think Rachel Weisz, Florence Pugh, and David Harbour all give really good performances. Florence Pugh and Rachel Weisz especially, but I just think it's maybe not the time and place to build a team and a family dynamic around what is the character's last film. Like, if they did this for, like, you know, if if they did this for like Captain America in his last film, and they tried to build it's like in a final Captain America film, they tried to sort out who's going to become the new Captain America, all that stuff, all the Peggy stuff, and just squashed it into one. Like just let the character breathe. You know what I mean? Let the character just
Mhm.
own her time on the screen is how I felt about it. I just would have loved if she had a bit more screen time. Is all.
Yeah, because the Captain America trilogy is, you know, the way they build out the universe is perfect. The first is a
Yeah.
Captain America film. The second is, respecting the fact that the Avengers has come before, so they're, saying that other Avengers are involved. It has Black Widow in a supporting role, and then the third film is an expansion of all the Avengers characters and all of the Captain America universe, and respectfully staying a Captain America film somehow,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
despite being,
They did it really well.
this huge scope event film. And the Thor films, the first two are all about Thor, and then the third film, that's where the Hulk comes in as a supporting character. So yeah, for that to be right from the off, and
It's
it's
yeah,
effectively
yeah,
booting her out of the universe, it is just a massive bummer.
yeah. I agree. I agree. Well, mate.
But I don't have anything further on the film, Matthew.
No, me neither, mate. Me neither. Yeah. I can't really remember what we usually do for spoiler marks. Do we usually give a rating out of 10, or we just conclude it, or what did you want
I,
to do?
I you know, I think we vary from time to time. You've sort of pitched this at a 6 out of 10.
6 out of 10.
So
What would you give it then?
I'll be a bit more generous. I think it's on the upper half of the MCU.
Okay.
I don't think
Okay.
it's not it's not something special, but it's something that I really enjoyed. It introduced this precious character in Yelena that I look forward to seeing the future of. But the cruel brutality of just kicking Scarlett Johansson out of the universe at the same time not giving her the solo film that we've been craving for years. Uh, you know, eventually, essentially making this, as you said, a team film. You know, it's like, I mean, if you see the first Avengers film sort of as Iron Man kicking off the team,
Yeah.
and then we see bits and pieces of the characters in isolation and then together. It is kind of this film, like she's essentially just assembled this team around her, but it's not about her, and it is just sad. So I think it'd rank highly enough in a tier list episode if we were to do one. Uh, but I can't be too generous, especially with how Taskmaster made me feel. So I'd give it a 7.5/8.
Yeah. I think that's a really perfect way of putting it, mate. To be honest with you, I think you smashed it there. At some point, if we do an MCU tier list, I think by the time we get around to that, my thoughts will probably change. And to be honest with you, as they
Mine
do
can
with a lot
only
of
go
films.
down from here, which is the unfortunate thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the earlier stuff, like your Iron Mans and your Avengers, like I probably would probably rate a bit higher. Whereas with the later
Hmm.
stuff, it'd probably be the opposite. You know what I mean? Um, there was like that awkward stage in the MCU between like it was kind of like that 2015 year when there was no standout movie in that year because I think you only had like Age of Ultron and Ant-Man. So there's kind of like
Hmm.
two good films. Like don't get me wrong, I know you really like Ant-Man, but like there was no sort of Civil War of that year or Thor Ragnarok, if you know what I mean. Like that was kind of a lull for me in the MCU. But hopefully 2021 is not that with with Spider-Man for me. I'm really hoping that
Yeah,
is incredible.
I think they really should balance it with half event films, half isolation,
Yeah, I
or
agree. Yeah.
because I mean their past formula was essentially a 3-to-1 ratio of you'd have like you know a couple origin stories, a couple solo films, and then the big event film, which would be an Avengers film.
Mhm.
And now it just seems like they are just constantly trying to one up themselves,
Yeah.
and like eventually they're just going to burn out, and
Run out of
then
steam.
they're going
Yeah.
to have to rely on doing a whole new batch of origin stories once all the actors want to retire, from the franchise. We're obviously seeing a lot of the origins of the Young Avengers play out on the Disney Plus shows instead, which I think is a very smart choice. And then maybe bring them together for a Young Avengers film. I think
Mhm.
that makes a lot of sense to me.
Definitely.
But if they just stop doing origin films completely and just try to keep one upping themselves with events, they're going to run out of events, and then it's going to be all origin stories, and everyone's going to be
Yeah,
deflated.
you don't want to put yourself in a corner, like you don't want to box yourself into that kind of stuff. I think you're right, mate. But yeah, I mean that wraps up another podcast on the channel. I'll be honest, it was probably a bit longer than we both expected, but I had a really good chat with you because I think with the MCU films, because we love them so much and they were our childhood as well. Like it's natural that with every new film we're gonna have a discussion about the extended universe. So
What
I was
was Iron Man the first one that you saw as a kid?
Iron Man was the first one I remember like getting the toys for and stuff. Yeah, like
Mm.
I remember Iron Man. I really liked the Incredible Hulk as a kid. Like yeah, I think I'm a big Hulk fan, so I was really yeah, Iron Man. I started off with Iron Man. Yeah, yeah. What about you?
Well, the first superhero film I saw was Spider-Man. Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. The first MCU film I saw was Iron Man. It was probably I got it on DVD either in 2009 or 2010. So I wasn't too late to the party. I wasn't someone who joined in 2012 when the Avengers was coming in.
Mm.
But the first superhero film I saw in the cinema, I believe, was The Amazing Spider-Man.
In the cinema, yeah. What was the first one I saw in the cinema? The first superhero film I ever watched. It was we were kind of born at a weird time where like there was a lot of good ones but a lot of bad ones. Like the first superhero
Mm,
film I remember watching, I think, was the Eric Bana Hulk film, which I actually think's
mhm.
very good now. Um,
Yeah. I mean,
and
the
then
comic book panel stuff's weird, but I like the stuff about his childhood.
yeah, like the three films for me that stick out are well the four films: Ang Lee Hulk, Raimi Spidey, Ghost Rider as well was I really
Mm,
liked that as a kid, and then X Men were the four
mhm.
um were the four ones that I grew up with. But the first one in cinema for me, I'm trying to even work my way through chronologically, MCU film wise. It might not
Because
have.
my first MCU one would have been Iron Man 3.
Mine was Iron Man 3 as well, I think. And then I would say X Men wise, mine was probably like First Class or something, I would say. Um,
Mm.
yeah, I would probably say,
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
yeah.
The first X-Men one I saw was Days of Future Past
Amazing Spider Man was the first one
in
I
cinema,
saw in the
not in
cinema.
general.
Yeah, yeah, Amazing Spider Man. I remember going to the cinema for that one. Um, and yeah, I would say probably uh maybe The Dark Knight Rises actually would have been one of the first ones because that was kind of 2012. So yeah, probably around there as well. I was probably a bit young to see that, to be honest, because it's got a lot of
Sorry, I have got it wrong. I just remembered because like I was thinking about this a few weeks ago, and I was like, what was the first superhero film I saw? And I thought it was The Amazing Spider-Man, and and then I remembered in the past that that was wrong, and I forgot to say here the first superhero film I saw in the cinema, Green Lantern.
Green Lantern. Oh, I remember seeing that cinema as well, mate. That opening with Parallax scared the shit out of me, mate. That was
I
one
was
probably
I was
one of my
rewatching it
first.
recently, as soon as we both got Now TV, and I was enjoying it. I didn't finish it, but I was enjoying
Yeah,
it. I mean,
that's Parallax still scares
there's a
me,
lot
mate.
of redeeming stuff there.
Mate, that Parallax opening still would scare the shit out of me. I really hate it. I would not go back to that.
Like I
Yeah,
think
Green Lantern's a
obviously,
fun one.
yeah, the fart cloud testicle monster or whatever, not good. But the suit, I think when it's glowing green, awful. When it's in a sort of matte stasis, perfectly fine. Love the dynamic between
Yeah.
Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively.
Mm,
You know,
yeah.
it feels authentically Hal Jordan. Like I don't have that many
Yeah, it's
issues
not
with it.
bad. We'll review it, mate. We'll review it. We should. I don't know what podcast that would go under, given that it's not in a
Maybe
universe.
terrible DC films because there's quite a few to pick from.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely.
I like most of them. You haven't seen Catwoman, have you?
No, mate. I would like to do like a podcast in the old sort of like the old MCU films that we haven't talked about, like Daredevil or Hulk. You know what I mean? We'll have to do like
Mm,
an old school MC. Oh, sorry, old school MC, old school Marvel and DC podcast or something like with
hmm
some of our favorites. That would be fun.
Yeah, because we've done X-Men, but yeah, we haven't talked about Fantastic Four or
Fantastic
yeah,
Four,
Daredevil or
shit, I
Hulk.
forgot about Fantastic Four as well. Holy smokes! Yeah, me, I totally forgot about that. Um, but yeah, thanks very much for today, mate. This has been a
Thank
long
you.
one, but a fun one. Like it's been good. And yeah, thanks very much for yours for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Please be sure to leave a comment in the film down below. We'd love to read them. And yeah, hope you guys are all well. Hope your family and friends are all safe and well too. Take care, and we'll see you later.
Bye bye.